Cool. Live?
Yes, we are.
Good. Perfect. We are back again this week. We're having issues with Simon joining the Zoom call. We can see him, but then can't hear him, and then we can hear him, can't see him. So he's going to join if he can eventually. But we're going to get started anyway. So we've got Lee back again from the Athlete Tribe because last week was obviously so good, Lee, that people want you back. We want to hear more from you. So we're going to touch on stuff that we could have touched on last week, but we ran out of time. And then might take some live questions if there are any live questions at the same time. George will feed those in when he can, but we're not going to do a huge recap on last week because people want to watch it. They can go back and watch last week's episode. But one thing, we did have a good question come in, I think, last week when you were speaking about your knowledge with the HIIT training and the differences between if it is HIIT or if it isn't HIIT. And I think the main point of the question was that someone was wondering, if you're an average Joe going to the gym, how and when should you implement their HIIT training? So is there a time? Do you do it in the same time as your strength session? Do you do it on a separate day? When is the best time to put in their training week?
So you kind of broke up, but I'll guess what the question was in terms of that. So if we're looking at building out a HIIT session, really we need to look at our work to rest ratios. Yeah. So the simplest way to do that is for every second of work you do, that equates to a number of seconds off. And we look at that as work to rest, or W to R. So if it's 1-to-1, it means that for every second I work, I have 1 second off, basically. So in terms from a HIIT point of view, you're really trying to push those kind of numbers up to say 1-to-4 or 1-to-5, and even further, because remember, when we're looking at high intensity work, we're really looking at the quality of the work. So, one thing that, and I've seen today, and we kind of touched on it, is, plyometric HIIT training. Okay. Yeah. So what we're really trying to do is with plyometrics is you want the movement to be the best quality that you can do. So you're trying to take as much rest as possible. So we'd push that out in terms of, those kind of numbers. 1-to-3 is probably the kind of the end of what you want to be doing. And the further away you go, the more quality of the work we're going to have. Yeah. Now, when you're talking about high intensity training, obviously what we're trying to do is you're trying to have a little bit of a break so that you can keep that high intensity up as long as possible. So, the simplest analogy is that, if you go out and you sprint 100 meters, then by the time you get to the 100 meters, you're going to be like reduced fatigue. Mm-hmm. And basically then what we're saying is that if we could then have a little bit more of a rest in between, okay, so you would do 50 meters rest, then another 50 meters. In theory, your combined 100 meters would be faster. Now, in terms of programming it, it's a really interesting question because they're really highly demanding sessions. And what you're trying to look at is the quality of work. So one thing that we kind of maybe touched on, or didn't touch on last week, is that you need to prioritize your training. So what things are the most important to you? If your high intensity interval training is the most important work, then I would either do that at the start of the training session or my first session of the day, basically. Yeah. And that's how I build it in. So, if that's something that you wanted to look at, that's how you would either split the sessions into a morning session and evening session, or try and do it at the start of a workout.
Just to go off a couple of points on me. So with regards to plyometrics, just in case anyone doesn't know what they are, or give an example of some sort of exercises. So break down just briefly. Yeah. What plyometric would be.
So, a plyometric movement is where we're looking to load up what we call a stretch shortening cycle. So the way that tendons and muscles store energy and then re-release energy. So from a sports point of view, highly applicable. Pretty much everything we do is a strength shortening cycle in terms of running, punching, etc., etc. So obviously jumping is a great example of a stretch shorten cycle now, and sprinting as well. Now what we have is, not to go too much into detail, but we have two real kind of categories where we looked at short and long stretch shortening cycles.
Yep.
Basically that's to do with the amount of time that you spend on the ground. So short means that you spend minimal time on the ground. So a lot of your kind of force application or rebound would come from your tendons, basically, because obviously your tendons act like springs. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you looked at a slow plyometric, it comes more from your connective tissues. It still have obviously some tendon in it. So when people are thinking about what they need to do and how their sports performance, they need to actually look at probably the time they've got to create force. Mm-hmm. So if Jack can squat more than Lee, which he probably can, okay, yeah, so that means that in theory Jack can create more force than Lee. But if I can create force faster than Jack, I'm going to be better at my sport.
Yeah.
Because sports are played where the fastest person wins, pretty much. So that's why we would definitely use a mixture of plyometrics, long and short.
Yeah.
And we would play around with either using short to long or long to short, and then also maybe doing short and long in the same session.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
covered it.
Yeah.
For the general population, Lee, would you just say that unless they've got some sort of sport specific goal in mind, that isn't just like a goal that isn't just fat loss or muscle gain, do you think that it's not necessary within their working program, or do you think it's something that you can still incorporate?
I think you can get benefits out of it. There is obviously an issue with doing it, that they're highly fatiguing. So you need to make sure that you build in your recovery around that session, as in post that session. I personally like everybody to be able to jump, run, climb, sprint, pull, whatever they want to do. So, I would also always bring it in, because everybody should be able to run, and everybody should be able to sprint. So for example, if you're running, so I was thinking about this today, actually, if you've ever gone out and tried to run at the speed of a sub 2 hour marathon, like what they've done, those guys are pretty much flat out sprinting. So plyometric training, your ability to absorb force and then reapply it as a bouncing spring is going to help you with your running. There's no doubt about that. So it depends, if you're just not interested in it, or you don't want to do it, or if your main goal, for example, is aesthetics, hypertrophy, then the question might be that probably they're not going to aid your training program.
But it is also, just jumping on that from the power aspect of like being able to run and sprint, I think it's so important for everybody, like all across the ages, because it's the difference between stopping yourself on a fall if you're elderly. Like us guys might walk along, catch our toe on a paving slab, and just recover our foot and put it back down again, because we've got that power in the hip to drag our hip flexor up and plant the foot again. Whereas somebody who is older doesn't have that same power, that their foot will stick, and then eventually they trip over and fall and do damage. So I think power out of all ages is just so important, like, no matter who you are, like you just said.
Yeah. And, the biggest thing that we need to understand is that there are progressions to jumping, so, and that's my, the biggest problem is that when I see some coaches demonstrating jumping, well, most people see that and think, oh, right, I can go off and just do a depth jump or do a multiple bound with over things, objects. But like anything, you need to build it up. So you go through the process of progression.
What is, we're just going on a tangent here, but what's your thoughts when you see high intensity fitness classes being advertised? Because obviously the high intensity has been taken and skewed in the high heart rate, isn't it? That's all that's basically happening. People are doing loads of hard work, not very much rest. But the benefit is the us anyway, to me, the benefit's very low in a classic act because you're just smashing your body into the ground. But from like a coaching prospect or point of view from you, what do you think when you see these?
So I think that, everything has to, one thing that's really important is that when we look at context. So, we have to be careful as a coach looking at another coach's session, and it's easy to, to rip it to pieces. And the problem you have is that it's more down to the exercise selections that probably are seen in these sessions. Yeah. And that's the biggest concern, is that whereby you've got, for example, multiple back flexion extension work, people with poor mobility, poor movement qualities or other, elsewise. Now, the flip side is that from a health aspect, if that is the only way that individual is going to go to the gym or going to get their training done, well, then fair credit to them. Then it becomes the coach's responsibility to make sure that they program the class so that it is both performance enhancing or health enhancing, but also
Lee, we've lost you, Lee.
It's frozen time.
Just froze.
Frozen thought. Great.
Maybe just thinking.
Lee, you just froze there. Would you mind, just repeating that, because you just froze there for a second. Sorry.
So sorry. So basically, if you think about it, that I've been in sessions with professional athletes, and there's been movements where I'm like, you can just see the fatigue setting in, and the movement quality is not as great. So then what we would do is we would just, pull back that exercise, pull back that work duration, give them more rest, whatever. Basically,
is there any exercises that let's say in said classes for a general pop, that for a high intensity point of view, that you would just absolutely avoid?
Well,
like if you would just say it's just not, because there's always a gain versus risk reward, isn't there? Like, is it worth doing the exercise? Is there too much risk involved in that exercise? You put it in a general population class.
I'm personally not a great fan of burpees. And a lot of my guys, especially the remote rugby players I work with, why are you not putting burpees in? And now in the sport of rugby and, contact sports, you are going to have to get off the ground, but you're not going to get off the ground 21 times in a row. It's so when people talk to me about sport specific movements, it can be a little bit interesting. Now, when we go to the general population, how many people can actually do 10 push-ups with really good solid foundational technique?
Less than 50%, probably.
Yeah. And have good range in their shoulders, et cetera. Then you're going to add on, right, well, you're going to be collapsing from the ground, so you're going to have increased force going through that shoulder. Then probably you're not going to be doing it with great technique. You're going to be arching your back, you're going to be pulling forward. So, and the problem is, if you imagine, if you're the instructor or the coach, it becomes very hard to then turn around and say, look, hey, stop. Whereas actually really what people have paid their money is for you to give them the kick up the arse and go, and that's the problem that you have. And, we've all probably gone to the classes and done things that we probably shouldn't have done. And,
of course.
You just, it's for me, like, it's like going on a night out, isn't it? Really, you kind of get in a big group of people. You don't normally do things. You and then you're away, and you're like, why did I do that? That's really stupid. and it's the same as being in that and
class environment.
But the positives are is that that team, that group, whether you want to call it group flow or whatever, you walk out of that class thinking that you've done amazing.
Yeah.
So, I'm not a great fan of burpees. Anything that's going to be unstable. So I'm not a great fan of like single leg jumping. I just see that's pretty, it's probably going to ask.
Like split squat jumps or something like that.
Yeah, so especially if you have a huge kind of a female population as well, that you're not too sure about, how good their knee stability is and their landing mechanics. It takes a coach a long time to learn about landing mechanics and seeing it happen time and time again.
Yeah.
And if you've got 25 people in front of you, you're not going to be walking around and being like, no, stop, yeah, go. And, you know, the biggest thing is that, you know, from a strength and conditioning point of view, our job is to improve your performance, but it's also reduce your risk of injury.
Yeah. Well, you said it, I think, before. There's nothing worse like than taking an athlete and injuring them by doing a 1 rep max, because you're going to look like the worst coach in the world, even though you might be the best, but you've taken that risk with somebody you didn't need to. And the same with these classes. Somebody could come fresh off the street into a class, start hitting burpees that they've never done before, don't have the shoulder range, don't have the capabilities in their back or the hip range. They actually get up off the ground in good technique. And I mean, there's so many successful ways to actually train somebody, because essentially all these classes are just burning calories, aren't they? And training them to burn calories safe and effectively. I've never personally used a burpee in my class. I'm sure that we've all managed to do higher, because we've all done fitness instructing classes. I don't know if you know our history, but it just doesn't actually happen. It just doesn't happen.
Do you remember the variation of burpees I used to get people to do in
like
classes,
a down
Simon? When your hands are elevated on, and actually it was always for much less amount of time. And what you'd kind of do is you'd have your hand on a bench and you'd do a squat thrust, but you'd land into a squat, and then it becomes not a jump. It's a stand and squat and back down. So, because I think the same as you there, Lee, I just felt like there was too much risk with an exercise like a burpee in a big class and that was for me like something I could do safely, but also tick the box, like you were saying, of getting people to, fulfill their, high work rate that they all come to the class for. So yeah, I think I have done them, but I've often adapted them. Early in as a PT, I used to get people to do loads of them. It's just, and then like people coming in with like, oh, my back hurt after class, and I was like, oh, I wonder why.
Yeah, I think that probably Jack can attest to this, that I've personally never worked with another strength and conditioning coach or been to a conference where they've turned around and said the goal of this session was to burn calories. It's never been on our agenda as, and actually not saying that we want to burn less calories, but we want our athletes to be more energy efficient. Yeah. Basically, because if I can expend less energy than somebody playing football or rugby, then I'm going to be able to perform for a longer period of time. And we know from a sporting performance, that last 20 minutes of a game, football or rugby or whatever, is a vital time where, most goals are conceded, most points are conceded. And, that's what our goal is. But, you see people and you're like, oh yeah, I burn, 1,000 calories and then I'm looking at my watch and I'm only burning 750. But the problem is that I might have done just the same amount of work as you, but my movement quality is better. So actually, in theory, I'm the better athlete.
Yeah. And going off the back of that, because you said a little bit about the landing mechanics and going through that and obviously being trained in that, but where you're looking and assessing athletes when you're thinking, right, this session's getting a bit too much, their technique's fading, is the reason that you're stripping back the movement then that you said, where you're stepping in, reducing whatever the volume or reducing the exercise, regressing that, is that because you don't want to teach bad mechanics? Because it's very easy to you're laying information down, aren't you? Every time you do an exercise, you're laying down a new pattern of information and you're building and building. But where I think where I'm getting at is that, in these classes where there's not as much, because you can't, because there's too many people, focus on technique, is that these people are just building faulty mechanics and they're just reinforcing it. Is that the reason why you do that with the athletes? Because there's no point A, taking the risk and pushing them because of injury, and B, you just don't want to build on bad mechanics. You're trying to keep everything clean, sharp, and do exactly what you want them to do.
Yeah. You kind of answered the question. It's our job is to train you in the gym, and then so that you then can go out and transfer that, or give you the opportunity for you to express yourself on a field or on a track or whatever. And that's the transfer of training. And the best strength and conditioning coaches across the world are the ones that transfer it across. So, and this is a broader conversation whereby I see a lot of coaches, they're living their success through their clients or through their athletes. So, you know, I've got George to squat 2.5 times his body weight, but actually, is that going to transfer to him playing his sport?
Yeah. Is he better at performing?
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, if we can build that foundation of strength, that will allow him to express more power. And then we can talk about, you know, general versus specifics versus competitive, all the different types of, you know, exercises that we would look at. And so if you think from a general population, you know, don't try and kind of be successful by your, you know, your client's strength as so much.
As in
actually, you know, if that individual's come to you for the goal, well, it's getting them to that goal, not for you, you know. And this is what happens, is that we need to be careful, and we all write programs that we like to coach, and we have to be very careful about that. And I've got caught myself is that 9 times out of 10, I'll look at my program and think, oh, I'd actually quite like to do that session, but actually that's probably not what that athlete needs. And that's the same with your, you know, a guy comes in, a girl comes into you, and you have to make sure that, you know,
Gone again.
He's got a friend. That's what happens. He's in France, see, so
keep continually.
I dropped it. Oh, they're back again.
Sorry, can I just elaborate on there? Sorry, Jack, I just want to get the question I was trying to burn in there, is that you mentioned before that when you're coaching athletes for a session, the never in your mind is the thought of burning energy. And what I asked Jack before is, as like certain athletes, and I think it mainly transfers indeed track, and I think rugby players have positions where they obviously want to be either a certain percent body fat or body weight. If you had an athlete that wanted to lose weight, what is your protocol to that? Because from my mind, it's not going to be do more exercise, because they're already peaking on exercise. So is it merely a nutritional standpoint that you go from, or do you change training towards that?
So it's a good question, and we'd adjust the training. So you know, we all know that if you want to lose weight, it's a combination of nutrition and exercise. You know, we know that nutrition does such a good job. We also know exercise does a really good job. If we put them together, you know, it's a far better option. So one thing that we would do is that we would look at increasing your amount of physical activity in probably the lowest form of intensity, and also from a joint health point of view. So for example, a great way that we used to do it, you know, if we used to have what we call fatties that need to you know, and you know, you need to understand we're in a professional environment, and trying to get people to get out of that group, you know, and that's one way to do it. And we used to have skinnies that we would try to increase their body composition. So a prime example would be like once or twice a week, or more twice a week, we'd look to try and do an extra session with you. So low intensity, you know, swimming or on a bike or anything like that, whereby it's not draining your neural system for you to be able to do your strength and power exercises. And it's just adding on a little bit, you know. And then from a nutrition point of view, is that obviously I've worked with lots of good nutritionists, so we'd come in and say, right, well, you know, we need to adjust your intake a little bit as well. So we're trying, like before, is that normally it's the idea that it's a longer term process, although the coaches and players want, you know, they want players to do it as fast as possible. Well, you know, if that we do it as fast as possible, their performance is going to deteriorate, you know, on the pitch and in the gym, but also the likelihood of them losing muscle mass is also going to deteriorate. So it's a twofold approach. You know, it's not the case of that we wouldn't want guys to burn energy as such. It's just that our main goal is for you to become, improve your conditioning or improve your strength. Our main goal is not for you to do this session to lose calories, to burn calories.
No, I was just very interested in it because obviously athletes already train a huge amount of time. And I just was in my mind, I'm thinking, you're not going to sit there and say, right, you just need to do 10 times more training. You just need to increase your volume by X, Y, and Z. But it's interesting, you do increase the volume of training, but merely through the safest aspect there, but also taking into account performance is still a massive indicator there. And even if I can transfer that into the general population, the world's so obsessed with losing weight as fast as possible, but they're neglecting how they feel in the process. Whereas if you're taking that nice and smooth approach that you're doing, where you're still looking at key performance indicators all the time, so in a normal person, how you feel, how you're sleeping, how's your stress levels, how you're recovering from sessions, should all be up there alongside how their progress is with a weight loss aspect. Whereas you find a lot of general pop is just smash, smash, smash. I'll do more classes, I'll hit more things. And recovery is so far away from what they're thinking about. It's just about trying to get a result, when really, and the highest level is, which I think everybody should always look at, is if they're taking that soft approach because they're looking at the health of their body, people need to take that approach sometimes themselves, because it would do them justice.
Yeah, I think that, if you look at the work of some bodybuilding coaches, you're trying to lose as much weight as possible by still maintaining, as eating as much as possible. If that makes sense. Because what people do is that so as you said, I'm going to, go 3, 4, 5 times to the gym, plus I'm going to be in a calorie deficit. Well, great, you're going to lose weight, but at some point along the line, you're going to stop losing weight. So what are you going to do next? It's like we spoke about it last week, hypertrophy training. Well, am I going to do more sessions? Am I going to eat less food? And this is where you get into that real, it's just a downward spiral. So then what happens is you don't start to sleep as well. Your hormonal production's reduced. You're more likely to feel stressed. And then what happens? You just have a massive blowout. You just, I can't be asked, I'm not doing this. And then you go right back the other way. And, it's interesting. I had a discussion with somebody, and I think some people disagree, but maybe that's the difference between a diet and nutrition. So a diet is a short-term approach where we're looking for a specific outcome, and we're willing to take a hit in maybe your performance. So for example, if a boxer is trying to lose weight before a fight, well, we know that his training's going to not be great, but we're willing to risk that, knowing that come fight time, he'll be able to refeed, etc. Whereas nutrition for me is a lifestyle. It's something that you do day in, day out. Mr. Consistency, Mrs. Consistency. And they're simple, not necessarily easy, as we've said before, but they're simple things that some people can do. So for example, not a nutritionist, don't take this as standard, but like I look at people's breakfasts, especially being on the continent, and there's never any protein in their breakfast in the morning. It is croissants, it is cereals, it is bread, etc. But when I say to people, hey, look, you need to maybe think about getting some protein in the morning because you haven't had protein for hopefully 8-10 hours, people look at you as if you've got 3 heads. And that's they're the simple things that the general population, you need to put in place, so.
Well, it's good that you mentioned that about the diet and the nutritional advice there, because that's the reality. Is that in our line of work, if we really want to make a difference, and I don't want to sell a 12-week fat loss program, because I know at the end of the 12-week fat loss, the person is not going to be any of the wiser than when they came in. They're just going to be skinnier. They have no tools. Then they move forward from that and develop and keep, because ideally nobody wants to go in and out of gaining weight and losing weight and gaining weight and losing weight. The lifestyle choice and change is the biggest and the best chance they have at sustaining that weight loss and educating themselves. and staying free of injury and keeping their immune system up. Do you know what I mean? It's so much more than just like I don't like the term diet, because like you said, it's got a start and an end. Whereas changing your lifestyle is just a forever going thing. Because and just from my personal experience with people, is people get a fat loss. And I think, that's great. I'm just going to go back to how it was. And how it was is why you initially came to get the fat loss. So it's always going to take you back to that place where you have to then go back on a diet again. Whereas if you teach somebody about nutrition, you teach somebody about why it is what the nutrients are to make you healthy and keep that going, it could last them forever. But that's key. It's good that you just differentiated that between the nutrition and the diet, because it's just key.
Lee, just quickly on the you mentioned about hormones really briefly. Then I don't want to get into that too much, but I just wanted to going back to the really high energy training, so the energy that really bottoms people out. And have you found, I don't know if you found it with any of the athletes that you work with or anyone that you work with, that if someone pushes themselves really, really hard again and again and again and again, do you find that affects their food choices? Is that something that you deal with? Because in my experience, if someone has 5 really, really tough sessions in a week, then they kind of bottom out so much that they kind of gorge on food at the end of the week or at the end of a day, where they're just so ravenous because the workouts have just been too tough. Have you found that at all yourself, or is that just not something that you've come across?
Well,
people always.
Sorry.
Oh, mate, you froze. Sorry.
Sorry. And then I stopped and then started. So,
Yeah.
So, for example, pre-season is a great example of what you're talking about there. So, we had a youngish guy rock up, 110 kilos. He's doing 2-3 sessions per day. So he's doing probably around 14 sessions per week. So, he's quite lean as well. So his basic, metabolic rate is pretty high. Add on top of that his kind of non-exercise, burning as well. On top of his exercise as well, you're looking at, I don't want to guess, but we were looking at like between 5,000-6,000 calories per day, quite comfortably. Now, and you've got to realize that as soon as they get out of the rugby club, they're not ours. We can only control roughly, what they eat for lunch. If we put on a breakfast, if we had some supplements going around, maybe if they brought themselves some snacks. So if you try and think about that, it's quite hard to eat that 6,500 calories of clean food, or what we would call nutritionally dense. We can eat chicken and broccoli till our eyes come out. It's never gonna, give that guy energy for the next day. And that's where I've definitely seen, in my first year, I lived with players, as a junior strength coach. They chucked me in with the players, and to see what those guys were eating, as a nutritionist, you would be like, oh my God, why are you doing this? What are you doing? You should be eating your chicken and your rice and whatever. But if you've ever tried to gain weight, and we're talking like, where you're eating 3,500, 4,000 calories, after a certain period of time, that gets quite boring. So, I would see guys, really try to put in the calories, because they're burning through the energy so much. Now, did it delay their performance improvements? Maybe. Did it make them not as maybe not as fast, but did it slow down that adaptation process that we were trying to do with them? Yes. But what it didn't do is it didn't put them into a deficit, and it didn't put them into that dip. And if we reduce calories, then we know that can lead to an increased risk of injury production, an increased risk of injuries. And that's huge, basically. And that's where I would say it. But then the flip side is, from a general population, I've seen people do it as well. We all had, I've trained really hard today. That means I can go out and, I need to refuel. I need to smash in. And I think the biggest way that people can stop that is to make sure that your nutrition is planned after your session. Now, we all pretty much know that this anabolic window's been thrown out the window. But from our point of view with the athletes, is it something that we would talk about, basically, because they've probably got another session coming up within 2 hours, 3 hours. So, getting some fast-acting protein, some fast-acting carbs into their system is not going to be, it's a must for them. If you're the person who's just finished in the gym and within probably an hour, you're going to have your meal of the evening, you probably don't need to smash in a protein supplement, on the way to the changing room before you even get out of the gym. And in saying that, it's really important to make sure that you've planned, for me personally, you've planned what you're going to eat after the gym, because you're going to get home, you're going to be hungry, you're going to be starving. And what happens is, never go shopping on an empty stomach, because you'll just make really bad decisions. So don't get your house and think, right, well, what am I going to make? Because you'll try and make the simplest, quickest thing, whatever. Now, if that's nutritious and healthy, well, great. But, I would say, think about those things.
I think the point there with planning your nutrition is really important. It goes back to the point you made earlier, where as an S&C coach, you don't have athletes and you don't plan your session around how many calories you burn in it. But making the switch from sport performance to general pop performance, I've had quite a few clients come to me and after the first session be like, I'm actually looking to burn 400 calories in a session. We didn't do that today. And I've obviously been like, what? Like, that's never been a target for me. But the thing we find our side is that they have this target they want to achieve in their session however many times a week, but then they have no idea what's actually going in. So they know all this stuff about how much they want to burn in a session, but then they don't have their nutrition planned. And so they have no idea how much is going in on a day-to-day basis anyway. And so the whole sort of theory's gone out the window anyway.
That's just hilarious, though, because it's so true. People are like, "Well, I only burn 600 calories in a session a day," and then I'm like, "You're eating a chocolate cake and having a hot chocolate drink after the session, which is more than what you did in the session. So how does it matter?" But you're exactly right. The people going in here with the information, I only burn 500 calories is terrible. Well, if you actually sat down, and I remember having a conversation once about this, and I was like, right, so because people get addicted to training, people get addicted to these calorie things, Lee, and they're just so obsessed with them. And I was like, right, so if you know that you burn 400 calories a session, but you only train 7 days a week, it's not good for your recovery. So why don't you reduce your amount of days training, and then the 2 days that you have off, reduce your calories by 300 calories. You're in the same position if you went to the gym, burned 300 calories and carried on your nutrition as normal, or you just didn't go to the gym and reduced your calories that day by 300 calories. It's the same thing, but you'll feel a lot better. Option number 2. Because you get recovery, but these people they don't pay attention to nutrition. They pay attention to this watch. It tells them this burn. It's interesting you brought that up.
And to go back, something I want to ask Lee about, because I know he's spoken about it before through his social pages. So the minimal dose response. As a S&C coach, with your athletes, you want to get the most out of their sessions basically by doing the least amount of work and the amount of stress on them, essentially, in some aspect, if you put it really simply. And for the general population, that for the way the attitude is that goes out the window. Like we've said before loads of times, they want to do more and more and more. But I think we need the general population, and it comes down to education, same with all these things, learning that you want to get the most out of doing the least harm, in a sense. If you explain it better, Lee, if you go on.
So, with the minimal dose, so what's the minimal amount that you can do to get a change, basically? Now, what we see is that we see people, as you said, reducing their calories, increasing their number of sessions. Now, the problem is that we don't give the small changes time to work, and that's the biggest problem, is that everybody is trying to lose weight as fast as possible. So we're coming out of lockdown. We might be able to travel. Everyone's trying to get drop some pounds for the beach, And what they're going to try to do is, right, well, I'm start going to gym 6 times a week. I'm going to go down 500 calories, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem is that, you know, it's not the best way to do it. It's not the healthiest way to do it. A long-term process is much the better option. And so, for example, I don't know, let's say you're already at the gym, I don't know, 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And you say, right, well, I want to lose a bit of weight. Well, what's the best thing I could do? Let's say that, I don't know, on my days off, like Simon said, I'm going to reduce my calories down, basically. And so it's the same as steps. People think about this 10,000 step rule. I much prefer to look over it over the course of the week. So if you look at it, you know, dropping calories, look at it over the course of a week, not over the course of every single day, basically. So you get to the end of the week and you look, right, okay, well, I've reduced my calories by 1,000 calories. So we know that scales aren't the best things to use, but they're a consistent way of you measuring your body weight, you know, alongside with, you know, pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And right, well, hey ho, if you're losing weight by doing that simple thing of just eating less on the days off that you don't train, you know, happy days. You're lucky. And then if that stops, well, what can I do? Can I add in another session? Can I do a little bit more, you know, conditioning at the end of a session? And it's those tiny little things that you can keep playing around with that are going to continually help you lose body fat, you know. And the flip side is the same for hypertrophy, is that, you know, then I need to eat, and then it's this continuous process. Whereas actually, like we said, we're only trying to put on a little bit more weight each week.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, because I'll tell you, what tends to happen is if people do drop the calories way too much, or with regard to hypertrophy, try and build the calories up too quickly, take the volume of the sessions up really high straight away, they leave themselves with nowhere to go then, you know, once, you know, because at some point that's going to stop. At some point the changes are going to stop happening, and what you do then, and what you've pointed out, so especially, you know, for both athletes and for the general public listening, is you're giving yourself a car to use every few weeks or every few months, you know. So you've spent a month reducing your calories by 200 on the days that you're not training. The minute that stops, a month later, you've got another 2 months of very, very small change. And I think it's a really healthy way of getting someone to lose weight and or gain muscle. Sorry, Jack, I interrupted you there, mate. Go on.
Well, no, it goes off that. My point goes off that as well. You mentioned earlier with the players when you're living with them and the amount of calories they probably have to use supplements at some point. But from our side, I feel that people, because they're sold them all the time and people want quick fixes these days, like we said, they want it now and want it quickly. So they look for these 1% things. So they'll go look at all the latest supplements and all this, but then when you actually break it down, you look at them, they sleep like 3 hours a night and try and train 7 days a week. So it's just more to get your thoughts on that sort of side, Lee, where people are looking for the 1% things when they haven't even got a foundation of anything to build on.
Yeah, so, you know, if you look at the best athletes in the world, you know, they've been training at that sport for, you know, maybe 20 years plus, and they've had a huge foundation built in them of, for example, strength training, movement quality, you know, good nutrition advice, and they're consistent with that. And then all they're trying to do is, you know, find those little things that could, you know, tweak the balance of the race. Because at the end of the day, everybody's motivation is exactly the same, but some people win and some people lose, you know. And the problem is that we look at the 1% gains because they're quite fancy and they're good to talk about, you know, I've got this new pre-workout. It's amazing. It's making all the difference to me. Or, you know, I'm taking this supplement, or, you know, I'm doing this, But actually, you know, and we all probably know this, that if you look at supplements in general, there's maybe only 3 or 4 that have had, you know, consistent data from a research point of view. Basically, you know, caffeine, creatine, you know, protein as a supplement. You know, they're the big three that if a nutritionist had to hang his hat on and say, you know, these are going to help, you know, beta alanine may be coming into the forefront, basically. You know, and then again, they're the types of foundational things that we'd look at, basically.
Yeah.
But again, the thing with supplement is, the key to supplements is you have to take them, and this is it breaks
consistently.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm taking some creatine. Oh, but I forgot it this day. Oh, well, I'll just double the dose tomorrow. You know, blah, blah, blah. But it's bullshit.
Creatine kills me, because people take creatine if they train 3 days a week. They take creatine 3 days a week, and I'm like, that's all well and good, but like, creatine's only working if you're consistently having it in the system. Plus, too, if you take it, I take mine post workout, because I'm replenishing. I'm building it all back up. So when I hit it tomorrow, I've got all that stored back up again. I'm not taking it 4 minutes before a workout thinking, I'm going to digest this down, it's going to bang through the workout. I'm replenishing what I used, and then the next day I'm going to use what I replenished, and then I'm going to replenish it again. But creatine is so funny. People just take it 3 days a week on 3 training sessions. I'm like, you've gained nothing. You've just lost loads of money. Well, not loads of money, because it should be cheap, but just wasted time doing something. And even with multivitamins and stuff, I mean, a multivitamin's not going to work if you take it 1 day a week.
Mm-hmm. Some people only take protein on the days that they train as well. They take, you know, so it's how bad was protein when we were first weight training, when I was about 16, 17? Do you remember how horrible it was? It was like the worst thing in the world. Sorry, Leo.
I actually thought creatine and protein was going to turn me into a bodybuilder, and the fact that I wasn't allowed it until I was 16, I thought when I hit 16, that's when the gains start.
My vision of myself 2 years after I started weight training is literally nowhere near what I look like now. Nowhere near. You know, I thought I'd be struggling to walk through doors. You know, just you know, now I just look the same. I think just older. You know, less.
It's so like that. But going back on what you're saying there with Jack and stuff as well, about that 1%, people ignore the 99% of effort there. They really do. You know, it's like fat burners. Like, fat burners actually work. I will 100% endorse the fact that fat burners work if you're in a massive calorie deficit, if you've been training consistently, and if you're down to your last nth degree on body fat and you need the 1% or the 0.5% to age you that bit closer. So a bodybuilder or something going to benefit from doing it when they're at 6%, they need to get to 5%. But somebody who is 30% body fat, 20 kilos or more overweight, is going to see absolutely nothing with a fat burner, because they're not doing any of the other things that elicit fat burn. That should be something that, and like you said with supplements, it's something that you introduce. It's defined. It could work. It might not work. We don't know, but it's something that might happen. And people just are smashing them down the left, right, and center, and they're ignoring the fact that the calorie deficit, to get your protein intake, to train consistently, move consistently.
Well, it goes back to the point Lee made earlier, in a sense, with athletes wanting to, if they have to reduce their body fat, it can impact their performance. So for us, it's classic society thing where that's like, when people have got like 2% body fat, that's seen as healthy. It's not. Like, people aren't performing it, that they've done it for aesthetics. Like, there might be some, there's like the genetic freaks that have like 3% body fat and are performing at the highest level on the field. But Lee, would you say in general that you're not looking to have all your athletes down like some ridiculous 4% body fat? It's not not a target. You don't set it as a target. It may happen because of their genetics and their training, but it's not something, it's not a KPI for the sport or the athlete to perform well at.
No, it's a KPI for the athlete. You know, definitely, you know, when it's coming to end of the season and, you know, the beach is coming, you start to see a few more boys
in the program.
You know, and no, you need to understand that obviously now, depending on positional specific, that, you know, some body fat can help in some positions, for example, in rugby, you know, but football's an example is that you probably will not see, well, I guarantee you'll not see any Premiership football players without a six-pack or a lean stomach. and that is just
Rooney aside. Rooney aside. Yeah.
A reaction to what they're doing for their training, because they're running so much. You know, they're doing all the right work. They've got a nutritionist that knows exactly how much food to put in their system to fuel their performance, and that's what we're looking for. Now, for the general population, that's really something completely different, whereby a six-pack is the goal. You know, and
how you get there doesn't matter.
Yeah, everyone knows that you can out eat your training program. It's pretty simple. Yeah. But I think it comes back from a weight loss point of view is, you know, are you sleeping well enough? I think that's the biggest foundation that I've seen, you know, in terms of hypertrophy, fat loss, strength development. It's just the biggest thing, you know. And if we think about it, like 1900s average sleeping time, 9 hours a night, you know, 2-3 years ago, I think it's down to like 6.25 hours per night. So we've lost like nearly a third of our sleep quality. Now, most of us, if we think about it, we're not professional athletes. That's not how we get paid. We get paid because of what's inside our brain as a cognitive athlete, and, you know, what we can impart on other people, basically. And if we look at our sleep cycles, you know, that last chunk of sleep is really important for, you know, improving our memory consolidation, putting ideas together, allowing our brain to kind of develop. And we're taking that away. And from a professional sporting athlete, that part is just as important, you know, because
Lee's frozen for a second there. So
you know, it'll come. What did he finish on? An important aspect, and then there you
go. Sorry.
No, you're good.
It's all right.
So if I'm faster than Jack, but he's fresher cognitive than me, and he can react to the stimulus faster, he's going to win the race. So, you know, that's a huge area that most people don't, you know, we just don't do from a, you know, and I don't know why.
From everything point of view, I think it's too much work. It seems sometimes people just don't want to delve into it or try and cope with the awkwardness of being like, look, your lifestyle's shit. You really need to look after yourself.
Well, it's the point you've made before, isn't it? Where I think people think they're performing at their maximum when they're probably performing around like 60%, but that 60% for them is their 100%. And they have no idea what it actually feels like to have, like we said before, with consistency, especially with sleep. They have no idea what it feels like after a huge consistent sleep to actually know what performing at their maximum is. So Lee, with sleep, when people aren't getting enough sleep, what are people doing to themselves? One, in terms of, because this is general population as well, so in terms of how is it impacting their cognitive abilities, but then also how is it going to affect them day to day with their training, with their food, their nutrition and things like that? What are they doing to themselves essentially?
Okay, well, there's obviously aspects, you know. So if we just talk broadly about sleep, so sleep is split up into sleep cycles, you know, and different phases in those cycles, and normally deep sleep and light sleep. So our deep sleep is when we're physically repairing. So that's when we have a lot of release of a hormone called growth hormone, which, you know, actually helps with recovery and repair. But obviously it also helps with maintaining body fat percentages, etc. Our light sleep is kind of for more this mental consolidation, you know, memory foundation, etc. So and there's lots of things that play out here. So if we're not sleeping well, okay, we can automatically say that if those sleep cycles go on. So really what we're looking for is around 5 cycles, you know, and that's where this kind of 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, etc. comes from. And what we do before we go to bed has a huge influence on what happens when we go to sleep. So to get a good night's sleep, actually it starts in the day, you know. So a prime example is, for example, caffeine. And it's a tough one because a lot of the, you know, people that I'm talking to here will train in the evenings. So they'll finish work and they'll be a little bit fatigued. Well, what am I going to do? Boom, I'll have a coffee, a Red Bull or whatever to get me up for the session. Well, we know that coffee has what we call a half-life. So that means that it's around 6 to 8 hours. So within 6 to 8 hours, that coffee is half as strong as when you had it. So that is going to affect us getting to sleep, basically.
Yep.
And what we want to do is we want to have this kind of consistent, nice fall down into a deep sleep, rebound up into a light sleep, and we go through this waves. And all that happens for us to wake up is that our sleep just gets lighter and lighter and lighter, and then we wake up. So that's the first thing, is that by having caffeine, that's going to stop that nice transition. It's going to slow it down. Yeah. The flip side is, what do I do I come home from the gym, maybe the football's on, I'll have a couple of beers, I'll watch some wine, that'll help me sleep. So yeah, it does. It helps you fall asleep, but then you fall asleep too fast and you don't go through that nice trend, basically. So they're the types of things that if we're looking to improve our sleep, we try to stay away from. Now, from an athletic population, we know that, if you reduce your sleep by 8-7 hours or so, injury risk goes up through the roof, reaction time decreases, and that's also important for obviously game situations, but also when we're trying to lift weights, we need that ability to react. The last point is that if we know we're tired, I think on average, some of the studies have looked, we're more likely to eat around 300 to 350 extra calories per day, just because of the nutritional choices that we make. And all that kind of information, from my point of view, comes from both a sporting point of view and also from working with corporate individuals, whereby, that's their lifestyle, is that, and it's similar to most people, is we get something called social jet lag. So what happens is that over the weekends, we get 8, 9, 10 hours sleep even. Then comes the week, and what happens is that we start to get 6 hours reduced down. And by Friday, it comes and it feels as if we've kind of been on a jet, basically, and we get that kind of jet lag feeling of not really sure what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So what else with the routine? What else can people do? You said avoiding. Obviously, it depends. It's hard because, as always, it always depends depending on people's situations. It's not always possible. For example, like shift work, it's a nightmare. So, but in general, what are some key points that people can take away from today to put 1 or 2, maybe 3 into their routine in order to optimize their sleep, which can help everything?
I think, if you go back to when you were kids, with your parents and guardians, they would give you a sleep routine for you to go to sleep. Now, what happens is, as an adult, we just think, hey, no, we're an adult, we're too smart for that, we can just go to sleep. And so we have different brain waves that we're working through on the day. Alpha is being our high kind of one, beta, etc. And we need, as an adult, to kind of go down this brainwave and kind of relax. So my biggest thing for most people is actually try to set an alarm to go to sleep. Now, for some people, that might only be half an hour. For other people, it might be able to be an hour. Ideally, 90 minutes is a great one to aim for. So I'm going to go to bed at 11 o'clock. My alarm goes off at 9:30. That means I start chilling out, doing this. So, think in yourself, right, what are my main stimuluses in that period of time? So is it my phone? Well, airplane mode, do I need to send emails and work? Probably not. Nobody does great work at 9:30 at night, unless you're, that way inclined. And then, but majority of people, so laptop goes down, all the simple things we know. So we reduce our blue light consumption, et cetera, et cetera. That's the big thing that I would say to people, basically. Because what we know is that if you can get a consistent time to go to bed, there's a thing called a sleep gate, which is like the perfect time for Jack to go to sleep. And if he keeps hitting that time, his body will turn around and say, right, no time to go. And we get something called sleep latency, which is the speed at which we fall asleep. And we don't want it too long and we don't want it too short. So my biggest thing for most people is to say, right, hey, to start to get a bit of routine, because morning routine is huge. Everyone goes on about, you know, journaling, meditating, cold showers, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. You know, what's the best way to start your day? Well, the best way to start your day is to make sure you've had a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And that starts, you know, before actually going to sleep.
Lee, can I go back to the point you were talking about with regards to, say, someone having a coffee before their evening training session? Would you encourage, do you think if someone has a good nutritional routine that we talked about earlier, would you relate someone needing a coffee at the end of their day to having a bad nutritional routine potentially? Again, I know we can't generalize completely because
Possibly bad sleeping as well.
but yeah, so let's say if someone spends their day in foods that are going to send their blood sugars up and down and up and down and up and down, by the time they get to 5 o'clock, time before their training, a coffee is all that they think is going to get them through that session. But would you try and look at their nutrition as well? If you're finding someone's going, I needed a pre-workout or I needed a coffee to get into this session, is that something that you just pause and say, look, what's your nutrition been like?
Yeah, definitely. You know, you've got to again try and think about it. And I spoke to a nutritionist about this, and he's talking about the expectations of that session. If you expect that session to be a very, very good session, then you need to fuel accordingly for that session. So, you know, you finish work, right? Well, what are you gonna do to make sure that when you train in an hour or an hour and a half, depending on your speed that your stomach empties, is the best thing to do. A lot of the times I found that actually, you know, especially in rugby, is the coffee culture. So it was actually just guys wanting to sit around before training and have a bit of a chat. So, you know, does it need to be a...
I think that was going to be, does it need to be a coffee?
Does it need to be a coffee? Yeah.
You know,
we got to does it need to be a coffee?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Does it need to be, you know, something with caffeine in it? Does it need to be a coffee? Can it be a herbal tea? Can it be something, you know? And the more caffeine you have, the more caffeine you need, you know. It's like alcohol, you know. If you don't drink for months and months and months and you go out and have a couple of beers, you're like, whoa. But if you consistently drink, then 2 beers is nothing because you're used to it. So, you know, I would question if you're always needing caffeine. How much caffeine are you having during the day before that build up?
It's probably linked back to people not knowing. People probably have no idea how many. They're just saying, oh, it's like 3 or 4 coffees, but they're no idea in terms of milligrams how much caffeine that is. And I imagine they don't know what sort of guidelines are and what's actually appropriate for them anyway.
Yeah, you need to understand that caffeine metabolism, or the speed at which you use caffeine, is highly genetic. You know, some people can have one coffee. You know, I've seen it in rugby clubs where one guy will have a coffee and he'll be bouncing around the room, whereas I've seen other guys, and you know, they're 3, 4, 5 coffees plus they're on probably caffeine supplementations before games plus and you're like, wow, you know, you're talking 1,000 milligrams of caffeine in a short period of time. You know, that's not good for you. And we kind of do live on this hustle grind society whereby, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, now Jack will kind of back me up here, but we're in a situation with some of the work we were trying to do where we're trying to educate leaders to allow people to train, you know, in their office hours, to be more flexible, to have freedom, to go to the gym at, you know, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the gym's quiet. And then actually, hey, if you want a coffee, you have it just after lunch. And then that's still in your system to get you through that session.
Yeah.
So, you know, don't get me wrong, it's a tough thing. And then the flip side of it is that, well, if I'm not going to train in the night, I'm going to train in the morning. So you'll see some people, they'll be getting up at like 5 o'clock, 5:30 or earlier than that. And then they go and hit the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning.
But they went to bed at like 1 in the morning because they're still thinking they're training in the evening. They haven't done anything to do that. Happens all the time.
Yeah, and the discipline to get up earlier is actually the discipline to go to bed earlier. And it's tough for me personally. What I'm trying to do in terms of the work I do is to try and educate people about training and about how you can take what athletes do, incorporate that into your work, and then that frees up. It should free up more time to allow you to train. It's simple, basically.
It's funny though that you went back and said about children, because it's so easy, isn't it? How many parents put their kids to bed at the same time every day, and then when their kids they've gone somewhere where they haven't got their routine, they're not at home, and then they put their kids to bed late. The kids wake up, and then they say how shitty the kids been, how bad a mood they've been in, they've been playing up, and we never think about that about ourselves. We think we're too old for that. That doesn't happen to us, but we just constantly grind ourselves into the ground, waste the weekends trying to recover, grind ourselves into the ground, waste the weekends trying to recover, when it could be as simple as just getting that routine. And like, I'm in a sleeping routine of my own, just because I get up early all the time, and I know that it just won't work if I keep going to bed late. But I find it impossible to get past 11 o'clock now, stay awake. Like, I cannot physically do it, but it's because, like you said, I must have just created this habit that my body, it hits somewhere around 9:30, and then my body's like, shut down, let's go. It's time to just stop and stop playing around. And some people are always like, oh, I just can't shut down, and it's 12 o'clock, 12:30 before they go to bed. But they spent years going to bed at 12:30. They spent years doing that, and they just don't have, again, they don't have any routine where they're just like, I just got to go to bed, hang it out. I don't think you're ever going to find that it's you can just go to bed from 12 o'clock to 10:30 and just go to sleep. It's going to be a struggle for a while. You're going to lie there for a bit, and it's going to be a little bit boring, but it will eventually happen, won't it?
Yeah, and I think that, again, I used to work on 10-minute rule, basically. So for the next week, come in, that person would go to bed at 11:50 for the next week, and we'll see how we get on, and we'd just build it in and knock it away and keep knocking it off until you get to 10:30, and that, whatever, say, a reasonable time to go to bed. But you can build it in. It's simple. Like, if you need to get up earlier, well, what you don't do is, if you're used to getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, go and set a 5:30 alarm. You just keep nudging it down, so that you just trick your body that it's not actually, and if you think it's related back to a professional athlete, now you look at some of the best athletes in the world. Well, all they're doing is each year they're just getting a little bit fitter. That's all they're doing. They're just nudging the needle that little bit. And over the course of time, that's where they become these elite athletes. Now, for the likes of you and us, if we wanted to go and play football or rugby or whatever, we're nowhere near them as athletes. And there's no way in hell that we'll be able to make that up in such a short period of time. So, and that's the same thing, that habits, consistently just doing, boring things time after time, but boring things done time after time. I think the quote is that exceptional athletes do unexceptional things exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And
so true. It's just so true.
And for an exceptional amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it comes back, I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where I've worked with professional athletes, and they can trust the process, and they believe in the people they're working with, and they just keep trusting the process. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Oh, it's happened. Happy days. And the general population is that you might have clients, and then they'll walk out of the gym and they'll look at something on Instagram, and then automatically, be like, oh, well, why as a coach, you're not doing that? I used to have it all the time, especially in certain sports, where kids would be like, oh, well, I saw this coach doing this on Instagram. Why are you not doing that? And you're like, because as a coach, I don't use Instagram as my go-to resource
for information.
No, I'm going to go to other experienced coaches in the sport, or, research articles. The list is, and that's what it's about. And that's where, as we said last week, if you can get a client that believes in you and is willing to be patient and invest the time and money and energy, well, it's amazing what I think that what's the saying is that people overestimate what they can do in a year, underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And I think for a body, it's even shorter. People overestimate what they can do in 8 weeks and underestimate what they can do in a year. So just bang, keep chipping it away,
Yeah.
And
just like that classic graph with that, if you do 1%, like you said, 1% every day, if you look at the graph, it just goes like that, and then it's all the way up at the top over a year. And and with all these things, like you said, we're not saying that from tonight you now set an alarm. Like if you've been going to bed at 12:30 every night for the last 3 years of your life, we're not saying now after this podcast tonight you then go to bed at 8, because that's not going to work. Like it's like getting a smoker who's been smoking for 20 years to be like, right, you're never having a cigarette again. It's just the habit's not. You can't just go cold turkey like that. So as you said, Lee, you just got to bring one thing in from today into your routine, 2 things maybe max, and then slowly build on that.
I think that people can go cold turkey, and we talk about the tipping point, the Malcolm Gladwell, but where, there is certain tipping points. People stop smoking because they have a heart attack scare, and I've seen it happen. Boom, I'm going to stop smoking. Or for example, people who are obese and they're like, right, that's it, and boom, and there's a tipping point basically, and we need to understand it's much easier to change from a position of being in a good state of health than trying to change when we're not healthy. And that's a big thing that you should need to try and take in all the time, because the reason why is that I think with habits is we get bored of them. That's why we stop them. It's got nothing to do with motivation. We just get, James Clear talks about it in his book, is that's the main reason why habits don't work, is because people get bored and they think they're not working. But
what sort of things would you implement to kind of mitigate that, to stop that from being a thing that stops people to hitting their goals?
I think that firstly, and this is...
You just froze a sec there, Lee. If you want to give it a second till you're back in the room. It's always when I ask the question. It's always when I ask the question. He just quickly goes like that and just stops. It's George. It's fine. Sorry, Lee. Go on.
Sorry. I would say that one is to take the small wins. So any form of improvement that you've made, however small, you need to be like, hey, this is great. Because as humans, we're very good to be like, I'm not losing weight quick enough. I'm not gaining muscle quick enough. And you're like, well, no, don't. So some of the people I work with, one of their goals is to try and improve their body composition. And, they don't realize that dropping body weight, as Simon will probably contest, is not a linear, it's not like a straight line. It bounces around, et cetera, et cetera. Trust the process. The second point is, to really try and believe in what you're doing, and have the motivation to go out and find good people who know what they're talking about, who are evidence-based, but who are experience-led as well. So they've done it. They know why it works, and they've done it with not just one guy, 2 guys, 3 guys. They've done it with hundreds of different people. Because if you imagine, if you're used to going to bed at 12:30 at night, and then you say, actually, hey, I'm going to start to go to bed earlier, just monitor how you feel. Basically, it's a simple one. Just see if you've got a little bit more energy, and then drive off that. Because this is getting a bit kind of into some of the stuff that I've done before. But if you think about it, like a lot of what we do is subconscious. We make subconscious decisions, and you can speak to different people, but most agreement is that we're about 5% conscious. So 5% of the day, we're actually thinking about what we're doing. So what we're trying to do is become more conscious of the things we do. So, why do I eat that chocolate bar? Why do I go to the fridge? And why do I, watch Netflix till 12:30? All these types of things that we know we shouldn't do, but subconsciously we're just ingrained.
We've programmed it. We've programmed it basically.
Yeah. and that's the way that the human is designed, because, you know, if 20,000 years ago, well, if I know that food is over there and I know the route to get to that, I just keep doing the same route. Boom, 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 boom. You know, I don't want to go off and find something different because I could get eaten. And that's the way that the human brain works. And that's where kind of, you know, coaching is to really try and make people more conscious of the decisions that they're making.
Yeah.
So obviously we monitor for all our clients, whether they be Gen Pop or like yourself, Lee Athletic, we monitor their progress. We often get them to write down their nutrition for us, just again, for that very reason. And for me as a coach, especially when people are struggling, but I've started to do it. I've started to preempt it now before people get to that point where they're a bit like, I don't know how well I'm doing here, as well. I actually show them at the end of the phases, hey, look, this is what you've done. This is where we started in week 3. It's now week 6. We've made this amount of improvement. That's X amount of percent or whatever it is. And actually so would you encourage people, if they're training on their own, if they don't have the benefit of the coach, to write down those small wins? And I guess it goes back to what you were saying in the podcast last week about having a plan. And if you have a plan that you write down, whether it be nutrition, training, or both, you can see the plan working when it does start to work.
Yeah, you know, I don't see many people in the gym with a journal, like recording their loads. And, you know, people look at me if I write down my loads as if, wow, he's a bit anal. What's he up to? You know, it's weird, but if we flip it and we said, right, well, people time their 5K run all the time or their 10K, then there's no difference basically. But, you know, we've got so much going on that how can we really remember what we did 2, 3, 4 weeks ago? And, you know, that's a big thing for me, is that, you know, when people come in the gym and they don't know really what they're doing, or, you know, they haven't got a plan, so therefore they haven't got a plan B. So for example, Monday I go in, all the benches have been used up, International Bench Day on a Monday, and you're like, what we're going to do? And you know, you see these guys like looking at each other and they don't have a plan B, basically. They don't have, you know, so yeah, you know, definitely is, if you're training on your own, write it down all the time, as much as possible, basically. And then probably my last point, and it's this one that's really aggravated me, and is that I've seen people time and time again invest money into the wrong thing. And we've all done it, you know, poor investments, etc., etc. But I've seen people, you know, go off and spend 100 quid on a night out or buy the latest Nike shoes, but not invest in a coach that can design them a program that's going to get them to their goals much, much faster and much quicker. Because we all make mistakes, don't get me wrong. And if we learn from our mistakes, we learn fast. But if we learn from others' mistakes as well, we learn even faster. Mm-hmm. And I had a huge discussion with somebody on a social forum about this, that basically he's saying, you know, you need to be out there making mistakes. And I totally agree with you as a coach, but you also need to work with other people that have also made mistakes, that you can learn from their mistakes so that you don't go off and make more mistakes.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense.
Why would you make the same mistakes over and over again? Because then there's no progression anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, so I was fortunate enough to work with a guy who is probably one of the most educated guys around strength and conditioning I've ever worked with. And he would basically say, I've tried this, it doesn't work, and these are the reasons why. And in my head, I'm like, right, okay, that's fine. If it was a coach and said, you know, I've tried that, it doesn't work, but they couldn't say why, then okay, it might be something where we explore it basically a little bit further. And that's where I think that, you know, if you are on your own, you know, there are resources out there left, right and center. And especially in COVID, you know, there's free programs left, right and center, but be careful where you're getting those programs from. Take the time, don't just download the program and off you go. Invest the time in to know who wrote it, why they wrote it, actually do you like it? Because the most chance is the program that you're going to do is the one that you like. And that's what I would say. It's like the diet, if we go back to that, you know, if you're on a ketose diet and you don't really like fat, you ain't gonna last. If you're carnivore diet and you're not really a great fan of meat or eating, organ meat, it's not going to go down too well.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I personally have to go, so that's a great point to end on. And I think the overarching sort of theme for most of the topics we can always link it back to is probably education. Sense that with the thing we mentioned at the beginning, plyometric hit, seeing that, people will take that off Instagram and want to go and put it in their programs when they have no idea of the context. And that links back to just then in terms of educating themselves on, am I doing the right things in order to actually make progress? But Lee, you have your own podcast, don't you? Where can people find more things about you and what you're talking about and listening to you chat? Where can people find that? So
again, it's probably the best way is just on Instagram at the Athlete Tribe is where the main hub of my information goes. And it's been great to talk, and it's super interesting to listen to you guys about your work with all the different individuals that you do.
Yeah, awesome. George, Simon, what's happening with you this week? What have you got going on so you can put a little plug up for everyone?
I took my dog for its very first walk today. It was exciting and it lasted 15 minutes and that's all she's allowed to do. Apart from that, now it's preparation in time for July with the fingers crossed that things are going to go ahead and we're going to get the green light to train. So it's getting the health and safety side of it sorted out, and then finding out what clients are willing to train. But it's not stressful. It's all right. It's going all right.
You got your classes go. Did you do your class today? Was that today or was that yesterday?
Nah, yesterday, man. They're just the ab sessions are terrible. I actually might have to stop them because time. It's in the middle of the day and changing. They make them earlier possibly, but they are just savage. I feel bad for anybody it takes part in.
Yeah. Are you ramping them up each week?
Well, I am and I'm not. I am, like, the time is still the same. The intensity of the exercises are a little bit different. But what the main problem is that I've got so good at doing them because I do 3 a week of core sessions. My endurance capability is ridiculous at the minute, but they're still really hard for me. So anybody who's just jumping into it must think it is just outrageously hard. So I do apologize for most of them people, but it's alright. It's good fun, isn't it?
I've got my shoulder stability tomorrow. I've got the normal 2 kettlebell classes at varied times and the banded workouts, which was terrible today, just so you know. So I did two different pause points on the split squat, 4 seconds per. Oh mate, it was good. But bear in mind, this is kind of like the 10th week of it now. So we've gone through. I'm gonna have to pull it back in terms of its difficulty next week because I think people are just going to start getting fed up with it if I continually make it hard. So I'm just going to pull it back on the next phase, I think. But yeah, I've got the shoulder stability phase 4. So that should be week 10 for everyone who's been doing it weekly. So week 10, if you have been doing it weekly, you should have titanium shoulders by now. Okay, titanium shoulders. So I expect when I get you all back in the gym, your shoulders are titanium, and I can make you do overhead.
Worse.
Yeah. Either I've made them worse or I've made them so much better that we can do 100 kilos overhead squats. That's kind of the goal here. Not your goal, my goal. But
without actually ever practicing the overhead squat.
Yeah, you don't need to. All the shoulder stability will do it.
Yeah, it does the legs.
That's all you need. Yeah. It works the legs, works the hip flexibility. Yeah, that's us, I think.
All right, awesome. Lee, I'm sure we're in the future we'll get you back on for part 3. That would be
no worries.
Brilliant.
Definitely, yeah. It's been great.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Lee, and cheers, guys. See you next week.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.